my guest is Rossina Gallegos, Director and Corporate Social Responsibility for the Americas Officer for Union Bank. Rossina joined Union Bank in 1981, and during her tenure, she has served in various positions in small business lending, special assets management, and multicultural markets. Rossina facilitates and manages the charitable contributions for the Foundation for Orange County. Rossina is active with numerous civic and community organizations. She's the president of the board of the Santa Ana College Foundation and serves on the board of the Orange County Children Therapeutic Arts Center and the Orange County Community Housing Corporation. She's also on the advisory board of the National Latina Businesswomen Association Inland Empire Chapter, the Affordable Housing Clearinghouse, the Hispanic Education Endowment Fund, and the Orange County Human Relations. Rossina, thank you so much for joining me today. Can you tell us a bit about your history with philanthropy? How did you get involved with various organizations?
Yeah, you know, when I think about it, I believe that it was by a leap of faith. I actually joined Union Bank about 40 years ago, and I started getting into different jobs. Before I went into the philanthropic arm of Union Bank. My jobs really took me into working with women, with minority groups or people of color. I work with a lot of chambers of commerce, with nonprofit organizations. Started making presentations mainly to women or Latino and Latina people, just to help as a role model. And I was talking about products and services that many times some of the underserved communities don't get to take advantage of. And I think that really prepared me to my job in philanthropy. It really paved my way to get into philanthropy.
Interesting. What was one of the first volunteer roles or volunteer leadership roles that you took on?
Wow. I was it's hard to think about it. It's been so many years. I think that we always have that sense that we want to give. We want to give of our treasure and our time. When I moved into this country, I remember getting some requests for donations. So I think I started giving to like the veterans organizations, World Mission. I wanted to sponsor a child in Guatemala. I also gave to like the Humane Society because I'm so much fond of animals. And volunteering, I think I started donating blood. And I also work in providing financial education. I accepted speaking opportunities, especially if it was, to underserved communities. So I think, everything that brought passion to you, there was always that sense that you want to give back. And it's hard sometimes for me to say no, to be honest. And I always say, when you're having volunteer, it's like going to the gym. Who wants to go to the gym, right? But when you're there and you start sweating, you feel good and you want to do it again and again. Same thing with volunteering. Many times it's taking the first step. But once you're doing that, it brings so much more than you give. You're getting back. You really do.
I love that comparison. I've never heard that before, Rossina. That's great. Well, and now you're the chair of the board for Santa Ana College, their foundation.
Yes.
Yeah. So you've come up in the ranks to the top leadership position, volunteer leadership position. How did you first join the board?
Well, education is one of my passions. And the MUFG Union Bank Foundation has been very supportive of education. Is one of the core values or areas of focus of our foundation. And community colleges are really special to me. I am a product of a community college here, and I realized that it's really an open door institution. That in addition of providing probably a good pipeline to a four-year university, they also provide associate degrees and certificate courses that help individuals really change their odds into their financial stability. So I got very close to Santa Ana College. I'm gonna call that SAC going on. And obviously, you start getting involved. I started as a board member, and then Christina Romero, who is the executive director of Santa Ana College Foundation, it's impossible to say no to her. So when they nominated me to be the chair of and the president of the board, I couldn't say no. I felt that it was important, especially because the history of the foundation board at SAC had been mainly men and not women of color. So I figured this is important to start providing some kind of a pipeline for people to come after me.
Yeah. And to be a model for others. I'm sure there are lots of organizations looking at this same topic right now. How do they continue to build leadership, and especially for their boards with people of color, minorities, everything, women.
Yes, yes.
So how do you approach this really unique role of being the board chair, the board president? There's a lot that goes with that role: managing various priorities, supporting staff, supporting other board members, figuring out your own priorities, what you want your legacy to be from that leadership position. How do you approach those topics?
I'm going to tell you that it's not easy because board membership is really a voluntary position. And the biggest concern is, how do you really motivate other board members to share their passion for the work of, in this case, of SAC, the Santa Ana Community College? So how do you keep them engaged? Through my experience in being on boards of other nonprofit organizations, I always remember that if we don't make people feel engaged and give them some sort of accountability, it's like, okay, so I come to a meeting, I go, and it's forgotten. And I don't think that it is our responsibility, as presidents or as the nonprofit organizations, to make sure that we value all of the skills and all of the time that volunteers are putting into the nonprofit organization. So I make a point, first of all, to make sure that they're engaged, that they're heard, that they contribute. I also want to make sure that they get to know the students that they're serving. And I work very, very closely with the executive director and also with the SAC president. We have to become a team, and we have to make sure that we're clear on the mission and make sure that we are actually performing and, creating the impact that a lot of our funders are looking for. After all, it's important to also be able to be mission driven, so that we can always create more opportunities for these foundations to have funders that like to contribute.
Right. Well, that's an interesting point about engagement for these board members and accountability. I'm curious on a, maybe not so much day to day for a board member, but a month to month activity. What are some of the ways that you get them engaged? How do you figure out what their passions are? How do you provide that accountability or put accountability into place?
Yeah, it's it takes some creativity. I actually, been in banking for a long time, I come from experiences where board members used to come into a meeting. They used to go through an agenda and they would say, okay, see you in a month or in 3 months, depending on how often the meetings happen. What we have done at SAC is we're trying to make sure that our board members have time to interact. We have an agenda, but in the agenda, we also make time for people to give their opinions, to make sure that they contribute by giving ideas. Not only because many times the agendas are put together by people other than the board members, right? It's between the chair and between the president, between So it's important to make sure that they have a forum where they can contribute. We also, like just today, we met at Sov's, a restaurant for breakfast, and we invited board members as an appreciation for the work that they do. You know, during the pandemic was especially difficult. You know, how do we maintain them really involved? So trying to make sure that we contact them to find out how they're doing, invite them to join some of the activities of the college, sending them a thank you note. Uh, so just keeping in touch, you know, making them feel that they're valued, that their contributions are really important, and that they're not there just to sit down and listen to others tell you what to do, but they really have a role in being, you know, in the strategic future of the organization.
Are there some ways that you and Christina set up that kind of a culture when you bring on a new board member? Is there an onboarding process, or do you talk about what your meeting culture is going to be with the full board?
Yes, actually, that's something, to be honest, something that we're working on improving, you know, and that is critical because when you get a board member, I think I always tell, even for people at Union Bank, it really is almost like interviewing. You're supposed to interview the organization and the organization interviews you. I think that there needs to be very clear expectations, you know, on what are the things that we're going to need from you, as well as the opposite side. You know, in particular, what we try to do is make sure that we introduce them to the board, we take them out, you know, to probably having coffee or lunch. We make sure that the chair of the board is there, and we talk to them about what we are looking to do in the foundation. We talk about some of the skills that we're looking for. We want to find out what their passion is, because within a particular organization, there are so many roles that they can play. And we also talk to them about committees. If they're not ready to be on the board, being on a committee prior to joining a board is a great way to get to know the organization, to get to know the board members, and make sure that it's a perfect fit. You know, for us at Union Bank, we don't want to just get someone on the board. We want to make sure that there is passion, that they know what they're getting into. You know, it's a responsibility that we need to take seriously. And so, yes, we try to make sure that we let people know about the expectations.
It sounds like there's a lot of social aspects too, you know, taking people out, giving them time to interact. My guess is that helps them feel much more comfortable in voicing opinions.
Absolutely. And I'm going to tell you, I'm extremely lucky. Cristina Romero, the executive director of the foundation, it's dynamic, totally dynamic. And I think that she really is interested in hearing the board perspective. You know, she really leans on the board and is not someone who is prescribing, but is generally really seeking and looking for help. She loves to socialize, and I do too. I think that the best way of getting familiar, getting in a more, I would say, building relationships with board members is having conversations outside the boardroom. You know, the boardroom is more serious. It's dealing with issues, dealing with facts, dealing with future opportunities. But when you socialize outside the board member, you get to know people on a more personal basis, which brings you closer.
Do you have any role models that you look to when it comes to being a board chair, or mentors that you learned from over the years?
I don't, I didn't have any mentors, not for board positions. I think the way I started really getting into board positions that were at smaller nonprofit organizations, I learned quite a bit, you know, just by observing. But also the MUFG Union Bank Foundation developed a training for board members. And I took the training, and really it opened my eyes in so many ways. And one of the things that we try to do is when we're trying to create an opportunity of engagement for one of our volunteers, they have to go through that training. But I think that experience really builds your skills to be able to chair a board. And also the training is very important because you have a fiduciary responsibility as you become a board member, and you need to make sure that you understand everything that needs to go with being part of that nonprofit organization as a board.
Rossina, you've been involved with organizations over the last many years. What do you see as some of the biggest differences between working with a nonprofit, say 20 or 30 years ago, and today?
Wow, many changes. In reality, nonprofits were used to be looked at as charities, which they are, but nonprofit organizations these days are really, they need to be more accountable and they need to create impact. Funders are really looking for organizations that are strong in their leadership, that they are financially stable, and that they are able to really take on their mission and be able to create impact long term. So that is a change that I have seen. I think charities in the past were not asked to provide so much in terms of outcomes. And also in terms of board engagement was more like having your name on the letterhead. But these days, boards are working boards. You have to put your time. You have to open doors for this nonprofit to be able to grow their donor list, and it's more of an activity where you have to be hands-on. A lot of the nonprofits really depend on volunteers for their work, but in reality there are also small businesses hiring people. So we as funders need to realize the tremendous impact that nonprofits are having in the economy, not just by creating opportunities for jobs, but also the work that they're doing in the social area, trying to solve issues that they can only do because that's their mission. That's why they're created. Many funders will provide the money for them to do the work, but without the nonprofits, I think that we would be in a totally different situation, for sure not better. So it's yeah.
Gosh. And with the number of nonprofits just in Southern California, I can only imagine how many jobs that's supporting and how many people that's impacting every day. Incredible.
Absolutely. It's kind of sad though that there's still funders there that don't like to fund operations or what we call the real cost of business. But if you compare people going to, and I don't want to put them down, but Starbucks, they would pay whatever money for a coffee. But when we talk about funding nonprofit organizations, they want them to do the work in a very lean way with the least amount of staff. And really, every program needs people, to be able to take care of the program, to establish the program, to make sure that things are happening.
Yeah. And I'll be honest, I think if more funders had access to more staff members to see the kinds of incredible people that are doing work on the ground, whether that's, Christina as the executive director, the administrative assistant, there's a lot of heart and soul poured into their work. It's more than just a job, more than just a paycheck for all of them.
I am going to tell you something. People who work for nonprofit organizations, especially the smaller ones, I have a lot of respect for them, and I take my hats off because you really need to be a person that gives with the heart much more than anybody else, because a lot of us really think about our careers, how we can climb, the big ladder to get to positions that will provide comfort and a lot of other benefits that money brings. But a lot of the people that work for nonprofit organizations don't think that way. So
sacrifice a lot for the benefit of others.
Yes, absolutely. But you know, as an individual, of course, you always have ways to compensate that. And that's where giving and volunteering comes about. And I think that we're very lucky here in the United States to have so many people that are absolutely generous. Coming from a country like Guatemala, you know, if we had a system like the one we have in the United States, I can tell you that things would be totally different.
Hmm. Interesting. Interesting. Well, I'd like to conclude our conversation today by asking you if you had one piece of advice, and I'm gonna shorten this to a board member. So if you had one piece of advice for a board member or a potential board member, someone considering a role on the board, what would that one piece of advice be?
Yeah, my advice will be to really join the organization because of your passion. That should be the first thing that you need to look into. Is this the right organization for you? Is this something that it's not going to be a job for you, but that you're looking for to really contribute personally, financially, volunteering your time? But I think it comes to how close is that cause to your heart. And then to me, that would be the best board engagement that you can do. And it will be my first advice.
Love that. Love that. Well, thank you, Rossina, so much for joining me today. It's been wonderful to have this conversation, and thank you for sharing the benefit of your experience and everything you've been doing with Santa Ana College. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Lindsay, for the opportunity. This has been a great conversation. And again, really delighted to have been with you today.
Thanks so much, Rossina.